Richard Roberts here, and we're looking at our second Weiss brother Ben Turpin comedy. This one's called Why Babies Leave Home, which is one of the many sort of question titles that you saw in silent comedy. They're sort of a mock version of the standard sensationalistic movie title that usually was kind of sexual. It was posed as a question. I guess we can blame Cecil B. DeMille for starting that whole style of titling. He did Why Change Your Wife and Why Change Your Husband in 1920, which of course led the silent comedy producers to give us titles of two-reel comedies like Why Girls Say No, Why Girls Love Sailors, Should Husbands Pay, Should Husbands Be Watched, Should Second Husbands Come First, Should Men Walk Home, Should Married Men Go Home, Should Tall Men Marry, Should Sailors Marry, Should Husbands Marry, Should Sleepwalkers Marry, Do Gentlemen Snore, Do You Love Your Wife, What's the World Coming To? Well, you get the picture anyway. Was kind of like I said, a craze. A lot of Hal Roach, Mack Sennett titles, and of course the Weiss brothers, who were happy to copy the style of the major comedy companies. In fact, they're also copying some of their gags at the same time. Happy to play along. So, Why Babies Leave Home, which actually sort of makes sense because he's, I guess Ben is returning to his family, and we're going to see Ben in a dual role, playing both himself and his grandfather. The fellow playing the landlord here is a comedy character actor by the name of Jack Lloyd. Name may not be familiar to too many of you. Laurel and Hardy fans will recognize him as the dentist in Leave 'Em Laughing. He was kind of an all-around comedy supporting actor. He also worked with Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy in their first film together, Lucky Dog. He plays the, I guess, the fiancée or the beau to the leading lady who Stan tries to pick up pretty much all the way through that short. You see him in a lot of comedies for educational pictures. He worked at Sennett. He's in Lizzies of the Field with Sid Smith and Billy Bevan. He's in Lloyd Hamilton's Move Along. Apparently a real makeup king, because he looks different almost every time. Like I said, mostly you see him in the silent era. I think he became a gag man in the 30s, actually working on Laurel and Hardy pictures. I think he was gag man, especially in the early 30s, things like Scram, Any Old Port, kind of around that period. Now here, we're seeing Ben playing his father, and a little interesting thing I think most of us didn't realize till we saw this picture is that Ben had false teeth, because he's obviously pulled his lowers out to play the old man here. But which is interesting. Those are the kind of little things you don't know until you actually see it in a picture. But yep, oh, there he goes, doing some teeth stuff there as the old guy. But anyway, I think in our last commentary on Cockeyed Family, I left off talking about Ben's career. Just kind of when he was starting to make it big. He was starring in the Vogue comedies, I think I said 1916, 17, and was getting some attention, as a star, to the point where Ben finally, at least as he told it in interviews, decided to go to Mack Sennett and see if they'd be interested in hiring him. And apparently he went in without his mustache or makeup and just sort of applied as any other actor coming to the studio. And they sort of told him, yeah, well, leave your name. And until he put on his mustache and really crossed his eyes good, and they realized who he was, and were immediately interested in hiring him. So Sennett did put him to work in mid-1917. Actually, at the time, Mack Sennett was producing Keystone comedies for release through the Triangle Film Company, which was basically a merger between Harry Aiken. The Aiken brothers had stolen a lot of the major producers, directors from New York Motion Picture Company. Basically, D.W. Griffith, Thomas Ince, and Mack Sennett were all producing for Triangle. But things by 1917 were not going well, and Sennett was not only producing his regular two-reel stuff for Triangle, he was also making one-reel comedies basically on the sly without putting his name on them to help sort of fill out the Triangle release schedule. And that's where they put Ben to work first, was in the one-reel comedies. And the first film that Ben made was a picture called A Clever Dummy. Well, actually, I'm not sure that was its original title, but it was a one-reeler in which Ben plays a janitor, which certainly has experience in actually being, who ends up being mistaken for a mechanical man. And the footage was so good, and Sennett was so impressed with it, that they actually took the one-reeler and moved it to the two-reel series and shot a whole bunch more footage, added some stars like Chester Conklin and Wallace Beery, who ironically Turpin had supported at S&A in the Sweetie comedies. Now Wallace Beery was supporting Ben Turpin. So A Clever Dummy was Turpin's first starring two-reeler for Sennett, and it was a big hit, and really put Turpin on the road to becoming one of Mack Sennett's major stars. Turpin just kept working. He was early on teamed with Polly Moran in some kind of Western spoof comedies where Polly Moran was playing a character named Cactus Nell. And Turpin did a number of those in 1918, 1919, when Sennett finally pulled away from Triangle and had moved the release of his comedies to Paramount. And that was another definite boost to Turpin's career, because Paramount was at the time pretty much the top movie studio and distributor, and so Turpin was getting big-time coverage. Sennett promoted Turpin to feature films when he started making features, 1919, 1920. Turpin starred in several, including 1921 A Small Town Idol, which was a great Hollywood spoof, in which Ben plays a small-town guy who goes to Hollywood and becomes a movie star, and the picture did very, very well. Sort of became a running theme for a number of popular Turpin comedies. He did a great one called The Daredevil, where he played a Hollywood stuntman who just goes through all this incredible abuse under director Harry Gribben. Like I said, basically, Sennett and his writers discovered that really that was a great thing to put Ben Turpin in, was sort of spoofs of major Hollywood pictures, or like I said, just spoofing Hollywood in general. Another really popular Turpin feature was the 1923 The Shriek of Araby, which was, of course, a spoof on Rudolph Valentino. And again, just the sight of Turpin, in Arabian outfits, seducing, gorgeous women, just seemed to work really well, especially since basically, I think everybody sort of felt that Turpin was not like one of your great performing comic geniuses. I mean, apart from the look and the eyes, he had, that look was worth $1 million, and he, could get laughs just with that. And I think they just realized a lot of laughs could be gotten by putting him in really implausible situations. And I said, the Sennett gag staff basically created another character for Ben called Rodney St. Clair, which was a spoof of Erich von Stroheim, and they would put him in sort of, these spoof Ruritanian romances like A Harem Night, A When a Man's a Prince, Pride of Pikeville, The Prodigal Bridegroom, and that became sort of a reoccurring thing. But Turpin was just, again, becoming more and more popular with audiences to the point where he became basically Mack Sennett's most popular and highest paid star in the 1920s. In 1923, he signed a contract with Sennett for guaranteeing him 42 weeks work a year. The first 26 weeks he was paid $2,000. The next 5 weeks he would be paid $1,250. The next 2 weeks $750, and then the last 9 weeks $1,500, which basically netted him approximately 75 grand a year. And so, this definitely was a sign that Turpin was making, his pictures were very popular with audiences. And I think really the only other star Sennett had in the 20s that came close to Turpin was Harry Langdon. But Langdon left after, just being there basically 2 years, 24 to 26. So Turpin was definitely the biggest moneymaker Sennett had. Unfortunately, some tragedy struck in Turpin's life in the 1920s. His wife, Carrie Lemieux Turpin, was not a well woman. She had actually been a supporting comedian, and she was in an auto accident, I think it was 1919, that basically made her health very fragile, and she lost her hearing, and then her health was in decline, so much to the point that Ben Turpin actually retired from motion pictures in 1924 to care for her. Left Sennett, didn't make any pictures, looked after her for about a year to 18 months. Unfortunately, she passed away in 1925. And Turpin, after her death, did return to Sennett and remarried again to a woman named Babette Dietz, and continued to make pictures for Sennett. He was also appearing in feature films. Around this time, 25 onward. He was freelancing, appeared in things like Warner Brothers' Hogan's Alley, 1925, a Columbia picture from 27 called The College Hero. He actually plays Rodney St. Clair again, and it's like the co-star of the film. He was working, again, very, very steadily until late 1927, when Mack Sennett, who was now releasing through Pathé, and was not happy with it because Pathé was also releasing Hal Roach's pictures, and also Sennett realized that he would be retooling for sound very soon, closed his studio, canceled all of his contracts, closed the studio out in Edendale, now Glendale, California, and began construction on a new sound studio up in what became Studio City. So everybody, including Ben Turpin, were looking for work, and that, I think, in some ways, is how he came to work for the Weiss brothers. Now, Turpin didn't need the money. Obviously, he had been pulling down, again, approximately 75 grand a year for the last 4 or 5 years with Sennett. And Ben Turpin was apparently really good at financing his, and investing. He bought a lot of real estate in a number of apartment blocks in Los Angeles, and so he didn't need to work. So it was pretty obvious that Turpin didn't need the money. Apparently, he just went to work for the Weiss brothers because he wanted to keep working in show business. He was still the Weiss brothers' highest paid comedian. He was making $1,000 a short. But the budgets on these are a quarter of what Mack Sennett was spending. Sennett would spend anywhere from $15,000 to sometimes up to $40,000 on a two-reeler. These were being produced for $5,000 or $6,000. But what you get there is, unlike Sennett, who would basically just stick Ben in funny costumes and exotic, expensive, looking sets and locations, you see Ben having to work a lot harder as a performer here. And again, he's getting older. He's in his, late 50s, I think, and somewhere in there. And it's good to see him. He proves that he could be funny when he puts his mind to it. Les Goodwins was the director of the Turpin Weiss brother comedies. He was just basically breaking into directing, making these films. He went on to RKO in the 30s, where he was in the short subject department there, directing Leon Errol, Edgar Kennedy, through large part of the 30s, broke into feature films at RKO in the late 30s, directed almost all of the Mexican Spitfire comedies with Lupe Velez and Leon Errol, those I think probably things he feature-wise he's most remembered for. Continued directing B pictures both at RKO and at Universal through the 40s. Directed one of the mummy horror pictures, The Mummy's Curse, at Universal. Got into television in the 50s. Directed all sorts of television. Maverick, 77 Sunset Strip. Worked pretty much up till his death in 1969. And he was, but you're going to see his name on a number of the Weiss brother comedies we're going to see. He directed some of the Poodles Hannafords and some of the Snub Pollards as well. He was one of the Weiss's more durable directors. So he was learning how to make two-reel comedies on a low budget. But you think about it, $5,000 or $6,000 for a two-reeler on the B movie level is actually pretty good. Some of the B westerns the Weiss brothers produced were being made on the same budgets or less. So that gives you an idea that these weren't as cheap as we probably think they are. But in any event, I hope you enjoyed Why Babies Leave Home, and we'll talk more on the next one.